So my next guest and I already recorded this episode. We spent time with each other, going over his book, his insights, how he came to it, and it was really an interesting conversation. And then we were done. We parted. We thanked each other and enjoyed the conversation. And when I was done, I thought for a moment, like that wasn't great. That was good, and I could put it out, but it wasn't who I know Ken Bechtel to be. I know it wasn't who's in the book that I read, that why I wanted him on the podcast. And it was just kind of niggling at me that, should I give him a call and say, hey, let's do this again? The next day I get a note from Ken. He goes, Mark, I don't feel like I was quite on, and I don't really feel like I communicated the heart of my book. And you were asking the questions and I wasn't quite there. What do you think about doing this again? Now, the interesting thing to me is this is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. This is exactly the book. It's that little thing that's going on. There's something going on inside of you underneath all the noise of, because our conversation, both Ken and I walked away with, it wasn't self-depreciating, like, oh my God, I wasn't good and such a terrible person, such a terrible guest and all that stuff. It was a gut level feeling of, we can do better. We can be of more service to who we're talking to than what we did. And we both honored that. And that's what we're going to be talking today. So my next guest is Ken Bechtell, an author, a speaker, a mentor, a podcast host. So he knows when he's on and when he's off, right? And he's got listeners over in 100 countries. Like the guy's doing some really good stuff in the world. His new book is called Follow Your Yes. Now you're going to know more about that. Again, we followed our no and our yes to get to this second conversation. He provides you with simple guidance on how to build confidence and eliminate overwhelm across the full spectrum of life. Ken is here to share with you the wisdom gained from more than 20 years as a spiritual teacher and relationship coach about what it takes to make room for you to thrive in this busy world, which is the whole point of this podcast, is how do we thrive in a world that's overwhelming us and giving us too much. I gave this book to one of my friends who's a self-help, like aficionado, who's read all the best books. And he texted me back 5 minutes into this book, and it's already got me hooked, and I'm already in action. So Ken, thank you for being back on the show.
Thank you, Mark. It's so great to be back. And yeah, this is exactly what the book's about. It's exactly what happened after that last recording.
Right? Like I actually teach this in my executive coaching, especially when new leaders, rising leaders are working with a peer group of leaders. I say, if you walk away from a conversation and there's something niggling inside your chest, or in the back of your brain that something was off, go check it out. It may be nothing, but go check it out. And you followed that for this conversation. I'm curious, what didn't you communicate in the last conversation that left you like I missed an opportunity? What didn't you communicate? Before we get into what I want you to communicate, what did you think you didn't communicate?
The biggest thing, Mark, was, and it was eating at me too, like the whole rest of the day. I was just like, something's off. Should I contact Mark? I don't know. No, I'm not going to be good with this if I don't address it. And what was off was I'd made it so complex. It's very, very simple. And yet I'd gone off into who knows where and made it really complex. And I'm like, I literally kept revisiting the questions you'd asked me. And I'd remember what I said. And then I go, why didn't I just say this?
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that, this wasn't aligning. It wasn't matching up. And what you said earlier, the introduction is 100% right. It wasn't like an intellectual understanding of, oh, this checked all these boxes or didn't check all these boxes. It was that feeling of something's off. That wasn't really how I want to show up, what this book is about. I wasn't honoring what you're bringing to your audience. And I'm like, I'm not okay with that. Now, you could have done whatever you wanted with it. And I actually said it that way. I said, hey, if it's okay with you, fine. If it's not, I'm willing to redo it, because that's up to you. You get your yes as well.
Right.
But as you said, our yeses were in alignment that, yeah, this wasn't a home run and we can do a better job. And there's more to be presented to the audience than what came out of that interview.
Beautiful. So now let's start at the beginning. So what is this book about? Follow Your Yes. First of all, what is your yes?
Yeah. So your yes is, it's funny because it seems like, oh, that should be obvious. but it actually isn't a lot of
Right.
times, because we think of yes in an intellectual way, right? You're intellectual, like, oh, yes, I go this way or I don't go this way. Yes, I eat this or I don't eat that. And we think of it as an intellectual concept. But the yes I'm talking about in the book is your divine guidance, your internal guidance, that feeling that tells you, just like we talked about with the prior recording, there was a feeling that it wasn't what we wanted it to be. There wasn't anything to check a box on. It would have been fine, but it wasn't in alignment. And we can always tell. And I love the fact you use that term, that niggling doubt. It's just kind of picking at you. It feels like that wasn't really on. I wasn't really there. And like you were saying earlier, you could have a conversation with somebody and you walk away and you're like, we didn't really, that didn't really do what we wanted to do in a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We never got to resolution, or we don't have a clear answer. And so your yes is that clarity of what's really in alignment with your truth, with you showing up as the best version of you.
Mm. So great. So how do I, so well, first of all, why do I care about my yes?
Yeah. It's exactly what we just said, right? It's like we know what our fullest expression, our best self is. And I'm not talking about the best you ever. I'm talking about your best that you can be in this moment with whatever's available. And so we know what that is. And we can also tell when we're not there, when we're not hitting that mark. And oftentimes we need to ask for something to be able to be supported in that. Like if we were having a conversation, we were trying to get to a resolution and I didn't get all the information I needed, well, then I need to ask for that, because you don't know that I don't have what I need, but I do. And so
Right.
for me, it's going, hey, I want to be my best with you. I literally use that phrase with people. Hey, I'm really committed to being my best with you. And so I need a little bit more information. Or I've done this when I'm having a conversation with somebody and I notice that I'm kind of not paying attention. Right? I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. And they're just talking and I can't really take it in. I will literally stop the conversation and I'll say, I'm sorry, but I really want to be present and be my best with you right now. And I notice I'm not doing that. Can I have a minute to collect myself?
Right.
And I've never had anybody not go, that's the coolest thing ever. Like,
Yeah.
you care that much. You didn't just let me keep talking and you're not even hearing me. But I don't want to live my life that way. And it
That
makes
was a
life a lot
hard thing.
easier.
That's a hard thing for men to do.
Yeah.
I started to learn to do that. It's like, you know what? I went away for a second. I'm not actually here. Can you repeat that? I want to honor what you have to say.
Yeah.
And yeah, who wouldn't be thrilled to hear someone respects you that much?
Exactly.
So how, let's talk about just in decision making and choices. For
Yeah.
me, I'll go to a restaurant where like there's 30 things on the menu that I'm dying to eat. And I can't figure out which one to eat. But all day long we're presented with choices. How do
Mm-hmm.
we start to look for something that's an internal yes rather than an intellectual justification?
Yeah. So it's again, it's much simpler than we think, because oftentimes people are like, I don't know how to trust my internal guidance. I don't believe in that. I don't even hear it. I don't get any guidance. The thing is, our guidance is a feeling. It's not a thought. And this is how
Mm.
the divine communicates with us. We get guided in life through feelings. Oh, that feels like the thing to do. If you think about anything you do, any change you make in your life, the reason you make that change isn't because of the physical change. It's because of how you believe you will feel is going to be better as a result of making that change.
Right.
It's always driven by feelings. And yet, especially in business, we've been taught to dismiss our feelings. Oh, don't make an emotional decision. If it doesn't add up on the spreadsheet, don't do it. One of my favorite um, things I read was from Sir Richard Branson. And he was talking about, he does his due diligence and they do all their stats and do all their research. And he goes, but every single decision I've ever made to start a business has been based on how it felt. He goes, that's why people have said, how are you going to start an airline? Who's going to compete with British Airlines? He's like, because it felt like it needed to happen. And it wasn't easy. And they got, went through all kinds of stuff. But he's like, I knew this had to happen. And I didn't know what was going to happen with it, but I stayed with it because that feeling kept pulling me forward. And that's the thing about our feelings, is they pull us forward. They're not shoulds. Shoulds come from the outside.
Right.
You've got to make this decision. You have to make this move in your career. You have to, sell to this person. I'll give you a great example. Years ago, I worked in the technology world, and one of my direct clients was Walmart. And as most people know, Walmart's very, very price conscious, and they really grind their vendors down on price. And they were always grinding on price. And I'd just go, yeah, we can't do this. And my boss would be like, what are you doing with Walmart? I'm like, we'll lose money. Like, we can't do it at our prices. And if they can get it someplace, I guess they can. But they're probably losing money. Do you want to just hemorrhage your company to say you have a big order from Walmart?
And if he's like most VP of sales, yes. Right? I just get the sale, dude. Let me worry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's looking at that would have been a should. Oh, we should have Walmart on our list of clients. And it's like, but is it really worth it if it's actually a negative effect in the long run? And that's where your feelings will guide you on that and go, yeah, something's off, even though it looks like it's a home run. No, we're not going there.
This tracks so well to only tens and my discovery of over tens, only tens. And you and I have talked about this, not on a mic, that we both kind of had the same epiphany and took it in different directions. That, you know, for me, I was always overwhelmed with the ADHD and, you know, trying to figure out, like, trying to do 12 things at once. I'm interested in everything. And I couldn't cut through to figure out what was really important to me. What was I committed to? Right. So I had a lot of shoulds. I had a lot of people pleasing. I had a lot of, this is a good idea. I had a lot of, I'm afraid to do it or I'm afraid not to do it. And that was all the noise above my internal yes. So my commitment, my 10, right? And so I read a quote in your book that says, a no uttered from the deepest conviction is better than a yes merely uttered to please, or worse, to avoid trouble, which describes me to a T in years past. A no uttered from a deep conviction is better than a yes merely uttered to please, or worse, to avoid trouble. So how do you help people take the clutter of all this learned, chatter that camouflages our yes and have them to start to see it?
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite quotes too. That's from Gandhi, and it's so poignant because I think everybody's been in that place before, where we're doing what we think will avoid conflict, or just because somebody told you should, and it's not your yes.
By the way, you're not off the hook. If you're a people pleaser and you just related to that, that's great. But if you're a hard driver, just look at all the things you're doing because you feel you have to do it for your vanity, for your ego, to be enough, all that stuff. So nobody gets off the hook here just because we're talking in certain directions. So listen carefully to this. So great. So what are some of the exercises to start to understand what's coming from your gut rather than your head?
Yeah. So the first thing is we have to actually realize that our heart is meant to be the driver of what our head does. So our decision-making process starts with the heart. That's the what and the why. Desire. And then our head tells us, well, how to do that. And then it's our gut that gives us the courage to actually take action. But most people skip the heart because I can't understand that. You can't quantify feelings. So let's just go to our head.
Or a lot of people just discount it because I shouldn't want these things, or, like what I want doesn't count. This is what should happen.
Yep. Yeah. And the other thing is, if you're really impulsive, you just go to your gut. You just do stuff. You don't think about it. You just jump on things, right? So what we have to do is realize they're all meant to work together. It's not either or. And unfortunately, that's kind of what our culture has taught us. Either you are really analyzing and thinking about this thing on an intellectual level, or you're being all touchy-feely. And it's like, no, they're supposed to work together. Because when we have that clear feeling that's pulling us forward, well, then we know what we're trying to execute with our brain. Oh, I want to make sure I maintain this feeling. I want to have this experience. Let's say it's with employees. Oh, I want to make sure that this is the experience that we have interacting together. A great example is there's the open door policy. Oh, I have an open door policy. For probably the majority of those people, that's a should. Oh, I'm supposed to be approachable, and so I'm going to say I have an open door policy. But they're not tuned into they're not trying to create a feeling. of camaraderie,
They're checking a
collective work.
box.
Yeah, they're checking a
Because the
box.
coach probably told them you need to be more approachable.
Yeah, or they
Because
read
a
a
lot, a
book
lot of,
or
a lot of my guys will, they start out that way. All right, I'll open the door. I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to open the door, and then they learn to love it. But I see what you're
yeah.
saying.
Yeah. So you just said the key part, right? I'm going to do it. I'm not going to like it. Okay. Then right now, that's not your yes.
Mm.
Right now, it's a no. That's fine. It doesn't make it bad. It just isn't your yes right now. What is the thing that you're going to like doing? That's your yes. So
Mm.
it's in the moment because there's countless things, just like you're talking about, you look at 27 different interests and you think they all have your attention. Well, one of them is the one that's really ready right now. It doesn't make the other ones go away or you'll never come back to them. And that's one of our fears, is the fear of missing out. Oh no, what if I don't do this now? Well, you can't do everything now.
Mm.
And doing all of them kind of isn't really going to be fulfilling either. So let yourself have that commitment to whatever that is and go, okay, that could last an hour. It could last a week. It could last 10 minutes. I don't know. But what I do know is that feels like the thing I need to be doing right now. That's my yes.
But Ken, that's so selfish. That's so self-centered. People need things from you. Like people need you to be a certain way. But Ken, right? Like
Yeah.
you can hear it now, uh,
Yep.
and you even have a chapter in there of who benefits from you following your yes.
Yeah, because it's exactly what our brain does, right? Oh, I'm being selfish. I'm being a narcissist. I'm being whatever. Well, the reality is, yeah, if you're just doing it for your ego, yeah, you could be. But if you're doing it from what we talked about earlier of your commitment to being your best with them, that's now a gift. Now you're going, I'm committed to being my best and I need 10 minutes for myself. I need the proverbial personal health day. Oh, I need to take care of my personal health. It's like, I remember I called into a company and said, yeah, I'm taking a personal day. And she goes, well, what for? I said, it's personal. That's important. And she was just this nosy gal that wanted to know everything so she could tell everybody, oh, Ken's doing this. But it was so funny because it was like, what a giant leap in corporate America to let people have personal health days. It's like, well, wouldn't we want them to have the best personal health all the time? Wouldn't we want an environment that actually supports that?
But here's the thing with what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Someone who hasn't lived this way, especially someone who's lived like I know I resented people who set boundaries. I know I resented people who followed their yes, and all that. I resented people because I couldn't do it. And you couldn't tell me that doing what was internally congruent from me
Yep.
was an unselfish act until only tens and I started to do it. I didn't realize that just because I was a people pleaser, because I was saying, that bullshit yes that Gandhi was talking about all the time. Like I was dropping things out. I was trying to be all things to all people all the time. And I wasn't keeping my word in a lot of areas. It wasn't until several weeks of committing to really trusting that internal guidance that I turned into a guy that you can trust him when he says he's going to do something. You can trust him if he said no, it's a good reason. You can you can trust him if he gives you a compliment that it's something from, like, I became that guy, and it built real relationships with people.
Yeah.
But again, pre testing this out, you couldn't tell me that it wasn't a selfish thing, that it wasn't, and now I see it's a generous thing to
Mm-hmm.
everybody in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And your comment is really important because one of the keys, and I talk about this in the book, is you have to give yourself permission to be a beginner. Most of us, whatever station we are in life, hate the idea of being a beginner. I want to be advanced. I want to be an expert instantly. And I mean, because what do we associate with a beginner? Oh, it's awkward. We stumble around. We make mistakes. None of that's fun. So nobody wants to go, I'm volunteering to be a beginner. But you have to do that so you can gain the trust, just like you said. You're not going to make some dramatic change with one of the biggest parts of your life, like your relationship or your health or your career. Start with something small and get the feedback that goes, wow, people really like that. Wow, that felt amazing. I got so much more done today when I followed my yes. Let it be those little pieces. And A great example, you brought it up earlier about going to a restaurant, right? And there's all these things on the menu and maybe they all look good. It's like, well, then just try one. Because if you eat the salad because you're supposed to, I guarantee you it won't be as satisfying as the thing
I
that's
feel attacked. I totally feel. So I go to a restaurant, like
uh
I want the pizza,
huh.
uh, but I'm supposed to eat a salad,
Mm-hmm.
like, and I go through all that gyration, right? And that's Maybeland, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's another part of your book is Maybeland, which to me is freaking hell. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah. Because maybe land is exactly what you described, right? Where we know it's not the right thing for us. It's not fulfilling our needs. It's not supporting us and being our best. But we come up with all these stories of, well, maybe if I do it for a little bit longer, maybe it'll get better if maybe my standards are too high. Maybe I'm asking for too much. And it's funny because, I mean, eating food is a perfect example, right? If you're having that salad because somebody told you you should, that's not an enjoyable experience. If you're eating it because you're excited about having a salad, it's the same salad. The salad didn't change.
Right.
It's how you feel about the actions you're taking.
But
Are
we have
they
to go
actually
upstream with
aligning?
that. We have to go upstream with the salad thing
Mm-hmm.
because there was an internal yes of getting
Yep.
healthy, of being a certain weight, of doing all those things. I walked into the restaurant.
Yeah.
Now the noise came in,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I wasn't honoring the original yes when I walked in, and started hemming and hawing because I looked at the menu beforehand, decided on the salad, and I didn't trust that and stay with that. I listened to the noise and go into maybe land.
Yeah. And that's where you tune back into, well, is the healthy lifestyle that I'm professing is why I want a salad? Is that really my yes? Or did I
Right.
adopt it from somebody else? Like, oh, you should do this. I mean, it's classic where, health is a great one. People are like, what's the diet I should be on?
Exactly.
The one that serves you is being your best. I don't know. Everybody's different. Everybody's body's different. Everybody's lifestyle is different. Sure, you can get some guidelines and learn more about the food you're eating, but you still have to make those decisions. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of times people go into these extremes and then they have, adverse side effects of my body shut down. It's like, well, yeah, I had my brother worked with a guy who bought into the whole thing of, eliminate fat from your diet. And he literally started living on like rice cakes and
Hmm.
apples. I mean, like no fat. And he ends up in the hospital. I mean, he lost a lot of weight,
Right.
but he ends up in the hospital because your body needs fat to operate. And he was getting zero because he thought, well, if a little's what you want to do, let's do none.
Right.
And he
My
went
my
off.
my ex-wife used to say that my obsession with healthy food and my eating disorder and my body dysmorphia was way more dangerous to my kids than them eating some junk food. And she was right.
Yeah. And the other side of this, so let's go back to you in the restaurant. It's pizza or salad, pizza or salad. Part of that is also going, am I going to feel good if I have the pizza? Or am I going to feel guilty? Am I going to
Dopamine.
beat myself up? Or am I going to be like, dude, I needed that pizza right now. That's awesome. I'm glad I honored that. Now, am I going to go back to eating salads again? Yeah, because I'm committed to a healthy lifestyle. But in that moment, that pizza was my yes. And there's nothing else I could eat and that would have made me happy. And when we do that, again, because it's aligned with us, it's different than I just mindlessly chow on pizza all day.
Right.
We're actually engaged in that choice. We're participating in that and going, yeah, that's what I need. It's kind of like that's why health programs have cheat days because we need to have that. They give you permission to not be perfect. But why? Because they know that once that cheat day is done, you're getting right back on the horse. You're right back on the program. You're recommitting. And that's really the key to any transformation. It's not the first commitment of I'm going to transform. It's recommitting when we fall off the track.
Totally.
Most of us just go, well, it didn't work out. I had my cigarette. I guess I'm done. I'll go back to smoking. Well, no, everybody has that. That's normal. You just have to go, okay, I'm doubling down. I'm getting back on it. I'm doubling down again until I get there. My goal is still to, in that case, quit smoking. Then I'm going to do whatever it takes. However many times I have to restart, I will restart. The only way you fail at something is to quit.
Let me ask you. So let's move on to productivity and overwhelm.
Yeah.
How is following your yes productive in getting things done and in feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah. Which is really so important because almost everybody feels overwhelmed nowadays. There's just so much
If you're listening to
pulling
this
at us.
podcast, you feel overwhelmed because this is
That's
called
right.
Mastering
Good
Overwhelm.
point. If not, we're wondering why you're here. Here's the thing. The reason we get overwhelmed is because we're chasing maybes. And here's what maybes are. Maybes are things that are really a no, but we wish they were a yes. So we're trying to
Yeah,
force
oh,
them.
that's so good.
We're trying to force it into having, like, we're trying to make the universe work on our plan, our timeline. And so we're literally going, I don't know if that'll come back around. So I'm going to try and squeeze it in here. And that's exhausting.
There's a country song called "You Can Lead a Heart to Love, but You Can't Make It Fall."
Oh,
And she says, "Oh, my heart is the only thing. Everything else is in love with you. My heart is the only thing that's not in love with you." So you're overwhelmed because you're trying to make maybes
yeah.
into a yes. I love that.
Yeah. Because that's the thing we have to remember. And this whole book actually started from a conversation I had with my friend Kurt, where he comes up to me and says, I figured it out. It's either yes or it's no. And I'm like, I laugh. I was like, okay, thanks, Kurt. That was really helpful. But then we started digging into
That
it.
was really helpful, actually.
Yeah, it was really profound because he's like, no, your yes is really clear and everything else is a no, and that's okay. But we have this idea that it's not okay, that everything needs to be a yes. And it will in its right time if it's meant to be for you. But if we just keep going, no, I have to try and do everything yes now, again, we're overwhelmed. So when you just let yourself go, what is my yes right now? All the other stuff's fine. It can be out there floating around. And you just go, I don't have to worry about that. I don't need to be overwhelmed because I'm carrying all these things just in case. And I'm trying to make them into yeses when they're not. I let them be what they are, which is a no in this moment.
Oh, this book is so this spiritual brother or sister sibling of Only Tens. It's such a beautiful thing. Um, there's a lot of talk about this. Steve Chandler, the godfather of coaching, he has this saying called "The answer to how is yes." Right. So we hem and haw over how to do something, and we haven't found that commitment. Once we find that commitment, once we find that reason, we usually figure things out. Derek Sivers talks about hell yes or hell no. Right. So this exploration, it's such a pithy thing to say. And in your book, what you do is you help us figure it out.
Yeah.
Because getting to that is not as simple as, oh yes, just only do what feels your gut right. You got to work through the noise. And what I love about your book is there's these exercises. There's all this humanity in it that goes to bring you to that. Another book is called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer, right? Like where his whole life is he just said yes to the thing, even if he didn't feel like it, he just said yes to the things that came into his life. And it really brought him to places he never thought he could. So following your yes is not only a practical thing. It's not only a thing for fulfillment in life. It's it's a profound thing. And I think you wrote a really cool book.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One of the quote that really sticks with me, and I think about it every single day. And I'm writing my new book. By the way, I'm writing my new book, building my new program, the Rising Leader Handbook, is because your book came in the mail. Because your book came in the mail, and because I read this quote in your book by Ringo Starr. Ringo Starr was one of the Beatles. I've never really done anything to create what's happened. It creates itself. I'm here because it happened, but I didn't do anything to make it happen apart from saying yes. Again, this is Ringo Starr of the Beatles. So we'll go back to this again. I've never really done anything to create what's happened. It creates itself. I'm here because it happened, but I didn't do anything to make it happen apart from saying yes when John, Paul, and George called. And I love that because when it came up, when the yes came up that I should be writing this book for rising leaders, and then, turning these high achievers into effective leaders, everything else in me said, no, I'm not the guy. I can't do it. I can't do it. And then I read your book, and my internal yes is to do this. So the next phase of my career is because of your book.
Wow. Thank you.
That's how much I really endorse what you did here.
Thank you. And that's such a perfect illustration of the power of following your yes, because your comment about, the answer to how is yes. Our challenge is we want to know how it's going to end. And that's why we don't start. Well, unless I know it's going to work out, why would I do this? Because it's just a feeling and I don't trust my feelings. Well, let's go back to Ringo. Did he really know how that was going to work out?
No.
Nobody did. To this day, you hear the Beatles get interviewed and they're like, it was a phenomenon. Like, there's nothing that makes sense about that. We weren't great musicians. These were really cheesy songs. And it's like, and it blew the world up. Who knew? There's no way they could have known. But they just went with it. And there's actually an interview they did right after they put out Sgt. Pepper's. And, it's got all this psychedelic stuff and they'd done all this work in the studio. And they made the comment, they said, why did you do this? You can't ever perform this stuff live. And they said, well, after that performance at Yankee Stadium, where there was, the famous performance with like 50, 60,000 people and nobody could hear anybody and they couldn't hear themselves, they realized they could never perform live again anyhow. So they didn't need to make music that could be performed live because they couldn't actually perform. It was an obscene thing with all this noise, like it was a waste of time. And so they said, well, what if we don't let that be a limitation? And they went crazy with all the 8 tracks and whatever they had in the studio then and started doing, how far can we push this? And then it becomes one of the most prolific albums ever.
Right.
Because they weren't confined by somebody else's idea of what yes was possible. They went, what if we just explored? Why not?
Man, I can go down this rabbit hole for another hour. Ken, thank you for coming back again. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing your experience and your work. The book is Follow Your Yes, A Simple Idea to Improve Anyone's Life. I wholeheartedly endorse. How can people get in touch with you if they need more of you?
Yeah, the best way is go to followyouryes.com and you can contact me through there, or there's information on the book or the program. And yeah, it's the best avenue for everything. Follow your yes.
Thank you. Ken, thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
And everybody else, my yes is your time and attention. I appreciate you a ton. I love you. Have a great rest of the day.